It was a few days ago that I was sitting down with a woman who was in her mid-70s, and I was listening to her share some of the stories of her life. I hadn't seen it coming, but the conversation suddenly turned to a guy that she had known 60 years earlier, before she met her husband. The guy's name was Max, and to this incredible woman, Max had been and always would be the one she should have married. The one whom, in her words, she let get away. As the woman spoke of Max and all that he would go on to accomplish and to become in life, the regret seemed to grow even more profound. Yes, she had married someone else in her early 20s. Yes, they had 4 children together. And yes, she had moved on with her life, or so it seemed. But in her mind, it was as if she had been living the wrong life. Do you think of him or of the life that could have been often? I asked. And not a second passed before she said, every single day. Toward the top of the New York Times bestseller list is a novel called The Midnight Library. It dives deep into exploring the lives we could have had and the regrets that consume us. The story is about a woman named Nora Seed, who's 35 years old, and she feels like she has disappointed everyone she loves, including, or perhaps especially, herself. From the outside, Nora seems to be extraordinarily blessed in talent and in skills. As a child, she was a gifted swimmer that her entire community was convinced would someday be an Olympian. But she gave up on her swimming during high school for a whole bunch of different reasons. She decided not to pursue that life. Instead, Nora would join her brother's 3-person band. And again, she would shine as a talented songwriter and musician. The band would go on to get offered a big deal by a big record label. It seemed like a dream come true. But Nora decides again, for a whole bunch of other reasons, that this isn't the life that she wants to pursue either. She turns down the offer and she quits the band. Instead, Nora opts to pursue love. And she ends up in a serious relationship with a guy named Dan, who eventually proposes to her. But 3 days before the wedding, she calls it off. With each of these decisions, she knows that she has disappointed people. Her parents, her brother, the band, Dan, and herself. Over and over and over again. And she regrets it. She regrets the pain that she has caused those who had higher hopes and expectations of her. And it got to the point where Nora could only see her life in the context of the things that she wasn't. She wasn't a swimmer. She wasn't a wife. She wasn't a mother. She wasn't a singer. She wasn't happy. And that was the loop that played repeatedly in her head. She felt that she had wasted all of the opportunities that she had been given. Despair consumed her, and she no longer wanted to live. From there, the book takes Nora to a place that is called the Midnight Library. It's a magical place, and it is filled with shelves of books that seem to be never-ending. And every book in the library provides a chance to try another life that could have been lived. She gets to see how things would be different had she made other choices. And then Nora gets to decide. With the chance to undo her regrets, would she actually choose differently? There's one book in the library, though, that looks different from all of the other books, and it is called the Book of Regrets. In it, every regret that a person has ever had since the day he or she is born is recorded. Nora sat down to read her book of regrets. It was divided into chapters chronologically arranged around the years of her life. 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 35. And the regrets all floated around. There were big regrets, there were small regrets, there were continual regrets, all sorts of regrets. And when she held the book in her hand, the weight of all the guilt and the pain and the sadness was agonizing. Nora went on, though, and she opened the other books, and in each one that she opened, she was able to access another life that could have been. But the craziest part about the experience was that she found that none of those lives really would have been the perfect life or even the better life for her. For example, in one of the books that she opened, she ended up going through with her marriage to Dan. She had been living with the regret of not going through with the marriage, but when she was catapulted into the life that they would have been living, she realized that Dan was actually quite narcissistic. And he diminished her. And he dissuaded her from her dreams. And he still had a drinking problem. And in that alternative life that she could have been leading, he was also unfaithful to her. And she wasn't happy. Some of those things were probably the reasons that she had opted not to marry Dan in the first place way back when. But over time, in her mind, she created an entire story about the life that they could have shared had she made the right choice. Every time she opened up another book, she realized that the lives that she regretted not choosing were not as wonderful or as perfect as she imagined them to be. But what she also realized was that the world and her life were filled with possibilities, endless possibilities. And that was the most important thing for her to realize, that if she could find a way to close the book of regrets, the possibilities of her life were limitless. Many of us can probably relate to Nora's life and her tendencies. How many of us spend time thinking about what could have been if we had only grown up in a different family, had different friends, gone to a different college, worked harder, dreamed bigger, taken better care of ourselves, found different doctors, taken more risks? As it turns out, there are two types of regret. There are regrets of omission, the things you didn't do and wish you had. And there are regrets of commission, the things that you did and you wish that you hadn't. It's easy to regret and to keep regretting all the days of our lives, filling up our books. But it's not the way to live, not to really live. Because if we spend all of our time looking backwards and filling up and revisiting our book of regret, we won't have the time or the energy or the focus that we need to live forward-facing. We'll be so stuck in regretting that we won't have much time left for reimagining or recreating. And we'll be so preoccupied with what should have been that we will miss out on what is or what could be awaiting us. A book of our lives that we might not even know exists. At the beginning of the book of Genesis, God's self, regrets. God regrets creating the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah because the people have become so immoral. And so God decides that God is going to destroy those cities but spare just one family. The family is that of Abraham and Sarah's nephew, Lot. So an angel appears to Lot before the destruction, and the angel tells Lot to get his family, to take his wife and his daughters, and to run and escape. The only thing that they had to do in order to be free is to move forward. The only thing that they couldn't do is turn back. Lot and his girls fled forward-facing, but Lot's wife, and you probably remember the story, she turns back. And when she turns back, she turns into a pillar of salt. So there are different reasons given of why she turns back. Some say it was because she was leaving loved ones behind, but the reason actually really doesn't matter. What does matter is that she is frozen forever. She is stuck because she can't let go of her past. For those who were able to see Hadestown on Broadway, or for those who read The Myth of Orpheus and Eurydice, it is that very same story. Eurydice fell on tough times. She's taken down to the underworld, and Orpheus gets special permission to enter the underworld without dying first. And he sets out to rescue his beloved. But Hades, the boss of the underworld, he makes a deal, and he says it's conditional, and he says that Orpheus can bring his beloved Eurydice back to life. He can rescue her from the underworld on one condition: that she follows Orpheus up the path and that Orpheus never looks back. It's a tragedy, and Orpheus looks back. It's a glance that will change his life and hers forever. Don't look back. Don't look back. As Jews, once a year, we look back. And in looking back, we do think about the things that we did, and the things that we wish we hadn't done, and the things we didn't do, and the things we wish we had done. And then we aspire, just as we did tonight, to let those things go. Sometimes our regrets, they have something to teach us. We can think about them long enough to learn how they might help us grow or guide us in the days to come, to do things differently, to do better, to be better. But often our regrets have already served us, and they are no longer serving us. They're simply being carried like an albatross or a burden that we need to let go of. Which regrets fill your book? Can you cross out some of the entries? Can you tear out some of the pages? Our ancestor who seemed to struggle the most with regret, he was the great patriarch Jacob. He regretted so many things. He regretted the duplicity that he used to trick his brother Esau twice into giving him both the blessing and the inheritance. For decades, he replayed those scenes in his head. Countless nights he tossed and he turned over them until he confronted his brother. Jacob also regretted that he sent his favorite son Joseph out into the field to meet his brothers when he was sold into slavery and thought to be dead. He spent decades, Jacob did, mourning for his son, and I imagine replaying that decision in his head. Jacob also regretted that when his beloved wife Rachel died, he buried her by the roadside instead of in the family plot in the cave. He spoke of that regret even from his deathbed. Where did all of these regrets get him? Well, we have some idea of where, because when Jacob met Pharaoh, who was also his son Joseph's boss, Pharaoh said to Jacob, "How old are you?" And despite all of the blessings in Jacob's life, he said, I have lived for 130 years, and the years have been few and hard. That's what happens when you spend your life looking back. The poet David Ray wrote, "Do you have hope for the future?" someone asked Robert Frost toward the end. "Yes," he said, "and even for the past, that it will turn out to have been all right for what it was, something we can accept." The work of Chuva is most often thought to be about repentance, about feeling regret and saying sorry and committed to doing things differently. But one of my all-time favorite thinkers, Rav Kook, he believes that the essence of Chuva is actually about awakening and ascending. He says that the purpose in life is to be future-focused, envisioning future improvements, because dwelling on the past will prevent us from living a life of becoming. Instead, he says, we should notice what we did wrong and then act to sincerely and quickly forgive ourselves and move on. Regarding all of our regrets, 3 questions we must ask. What can I learn from this? What did this come to teach me? And what is God trying to say to me now? What would your life feel like if you could do that? What would your life feel like if you could make space to dream, to imagine or reimagine? Last week on Rosh Hashanah, I noticed during the service that I kept lowering the bar. I would say things like, how do you yearn to change? And then I would add, in ways big or small. I would say, what is something that you yearn for? And then I would add, and that might be a big dream or maybe just a small hope. And when I got home, I started to think about this. You see, my own voice and my own inclination was to stifle the dreaming. And I don't want to do that. Because Yom Kippur is as big and as dramatic as things get. So let's go big and brave and bold this year. Let's not diminish our goals. Let's dream dreams that feel just beyond our reach. A friend of mine has a daughter who just graduated from college. He shared that she had 2 job offers, and she turned to him for advice on which to take. His only piece of advice for her was this: choose the one that scares you the most. Today, I want to ask you to do the same. To choose the thing that scares you. To have the conversations that scare you. To ask for the things that you want so badly in life that you can't even speak of them. And to realize that there are infinite possibilities for your life and for all of our lives. This year, let's chase our futures, not our pasts. This year, let's let the old selves and the old stories and the old lives die, and let's see what awaits us in the new books and our new lives. And let us have the chutzpah to see who we might become. Let's not use Chuva to return only to what was, but instead let's use it and the power of this night to awaken us and to ascend and to ultimately find our joy. Shana Tova.